600. That's how many people throughout all of human history have ever been to space. The first, Yuri Gagarin, a Soviet cosmonaut who, in 1961, became the first known space traveler. But times are changing, and they're changing fast. In 2021, SpaceX flew the first all-civilian crew to space. Elon Musk expects 1 million humans to be living on Mars by 2050. And NASA estimates that we'll have a base camp on the moon by 2030. And the first space hotel? Well, that's expected by 2025.
Pretty soon you can check into one of 2 hotels being built outside our atmosphere.
Within the next 2 decades, space will soon look less like an infinite black abyss and more like the Vegas Strip on a Friday night. With the meteoric rise of companies such as SpaceX, Blue Origin, and Virgin Galactic, each of which aims to fly manned missions to space within the next several years, space exploration, space tourism, and space colonization is about to make space a very busy place. Consequently, in the not-too-distant future, there will be thousands of people living in and traveling through space. And what happens when you put large numbers of humans together? Well, unfortunately, with humans being human, you have crime. But what happens when crimes are committed in space? Which nation's laws apply to space crimes? How do you actually arrest someone in space? Where do you find a jury of your peers on Mars, a space hotel, or the moon? These are all questions that need to be answered as space becomes colonized. Join us as we explore space laws and what happens when a crime is committed in space. Also, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment. Now let's get right into it. Living in space isn't easy. Even for the strongest and most prepared among us, space travel is difficult. Over the years, several experiments have been conducted in space and on Earth to test human responses to isolation conditions in space. In perhaps the most notorious example, in 1998, a test was conducted by the Russian Institute of Biomedical Problems, where 7 male astronauts and 1 female astronaut spent 110 days aboard a replica of the Mir space station. During the course of the experiment, several crimes were allegedly committed, with 2 astronauts reportedly committing battery, assault, and attempted murder, and 1, the commander, allegedly sexually assaulting and harassing the female astronaut. And what was learned? The living in isolation conditions in space, even for those who are specially trained, isn't easy. In fact, it will likely be quite messy. And understanding that it will be messy necessitates that we'll figure out what to do in the event crimes are committed. This issue first came to light in a roundabout way in July 1970 in a bizarre killing on a floating Arctic ice island over a jug of homemade raisin wine. Both men involved in the incident were Americans. However, since the crime took place outside of U.S. territory, or any country's territory for that matter, the question arose: whose laws should apply? Further complicating the issue was the fact that icebergs aren't actually permanent territories. They are floating blocks of frozen water. For the first time, people had to consider how laws applied to areas where there were technically no laws. Time magazine called the case "Murder in Legal Limbo." Shortly after this case, people began to consider how laws might apply in outer space. Space, like the high seas, is considered to be what we call res communis, which means it belongs to everyone and to no one. Nor can any country lay claim to it. However, notwithstanding the fact that space is not subject to the legal title of any state, there are international laws aimed at governing crimes in space. There are currently 5 main international treaties governing activities in space: the Outer Space Treaty, the Return and Rescue Agreement, the Liability Convention, the Registration Convention, and the Moon Agreement. Each of these treaties fall under the jurisdiction of the aptly named United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. Summarized broadly, these treaties require the exploration and use of outer space to be free, in the interests of all countries on Earth, and that space is not subject to any claim of national sovereignty. Further, the moon and other celestial bodies are to be used only for peaceful purposes, and that nations are responsible for their national space activities and are liable for damage caused by their space objects. However, among all of these space treaties and declarations, The 1967 Outer Space Treaty, ratified by over 100 countries, is the most relevant when it comes to dealing with crimes in space. Some have even gone so far as to call it the Magna Carta of space. Under the terms of the Outer Space Treaty, the general rule is that a spacefaring criminal is subject to the law of the country of which they are a citizen, or the country aboard whose registered spacecraft the crime was committed. Seems clear, right? Not so fast. What happens if a Canadian woman poisons a Chinese man on a spaceship owned by a US-Belgian conglomerate that's headquartered in Luxembourg? The space laws as they currently exist don't provide a clear-cut answer. In taking the next logical step towards peaceful space colonization, we will soon be confronted with the following issues. Where does space begin and Earth end? The Earth's atmosphere doesn't have a solid boundary, which may make it very difficult to determine whether space or air laws should apply. How do you arrest someone in space? Mars is months away at its closest. Is it worth arresting someone when it may cost billions to simply make an arrest? Who will deal with family disputes that arise when colonies are set up on Mars? Should an Earth-based court have jurisdiction over people who've never set foot on Earth? How do you find a jury of peers on Earth for space crimes? Can anyone truly understand life on Mars and pass reasonable judgments on them from Earth? What about space hotels? Whose jurisdiction is it when a watch is stolen? Or an assault during a drunken brawl in a space bar? Even the current space laws we have only deal exclusively with nations, but what laws will govern companies and private citizens? These are only a few of the questions that will need to be answered over the next few decades. Some countries, however, are taking a proactive approach. Canada just recently proposed an amendment to legislation extending Canadian criminal jurisdiction to space. Under Bill C-19, Canadian crew members who commit crimes outside of Canada in space will be subject to prosecution in Canada as though the crime took place in Canada. It's assumed that other countries will enact similar laws governing their own nation's space travelers. Whatever is ultimately decided, it's clear that with the dawn of space colonization, we will be presented with problems and issues that we, as a human race, have never had to deal with before. And how we deal with crimes in space may in large part ultimately determine how successful we become as a spacefaring civilization. Well, that brings us to the end of today's video. If you liked our content, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one.